You ever wonder why someone you care about can just let you go without a fight? Why they pull away when things start to get real? Let's get something straight. It's not about you being too much. It's not about you not being enough. This is about the avoidant, the one who shuts down instead of opening up, the one who disappears when you start showing up. And today, we're cutting through the confusion and getting real about why they let you walk away and why you need to stop chasing answers from someone who's running from themselves. The avoidance core fear isn't rejection, it's engulfment. It's the fear of being consumed by someone else's needs, emotions, or expectations. While many people fear abandonment, avoidants are terrified of losing themselves in a relationship. They grew up learning, often unconsciously, that emotional closeness leads to pressure, loss of independence, or even pain. Maybe they had caregivers who were intrusive, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable. Over time, they internalized a belief that vulnerability leads to being overwhelmed, judged, or controlled. So when someone gets close, when intimacy starts to build, the avoidant brain doesn't register it as comfort. It registers it as danger. Their nervous system becomes activated. Walls go up. They may start to pull back, get cold, act distant, or even disappear completely. It's not calculated cruelty, it's emotional survival. Their instinct isn't to move toward connection. It's to protect themselves from what connection represents: potential loss of autonomy, emotional chaos, or expectations they fear they can't meet. This fear shapes how they love. They might crave closeness in theory, even pursue it, but the moment it becomes real, they hit the brakes. Not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels risky. The deeper the bond, the stronger the urge to retreat. They convince themselves they're better off alone, that the relationship was too intense, or that you wanted too much. And in reality, what they truly wanted was to feel safe in closeness. But their fear made them believe it wasn't possible. Emotional intimacy to an avoidant doesn't feel like warmth. It feels like pressure. What most people interpret as closeness, support, and vulnerability, the avoidant interprets as losing control or being emotionally trapped. When someone starts to open up to them, when feelings deepen and the connection grows stronger, it triggers a subconscious alarm. Instead of leaning in, they start pulling away. Not because they don't feel anything, but because those feelings make them deeply uncomfortable. To understand this, you have to look at how emotional intimacy was experienced in their early life. Maybe when they showed feelings as a child, they were met with judgment, punishment, or neglect. Maybe they learned that needing others or expressing themselves made them seem weak or burdensome. So now, as adults, emotional closeness carries that same emotional weight. It feels like an obligation, a demand, or a setup for disappointment. Their default response becomes self-protection through detachment. This is why when you express your needs or ask for more connection, they don't respond with empathy. They withdraw. They might change the subject, shut down, or accuse you of being too needy. It's not that they don't want connection deep down. It's that they're not wired to experience it as something safe or sustainable. To them, opening up means letting their guard down, and letting their guard down has never felt like a good idea. It feels like surrendering control, and that's the one thing they can't risk. And so instead of embracing intimacy, they keep it at arm's length. They want connection without vulnerability, closeness without emotional exposure. And that's why they let people walk away. Because allowing someone in feels far more threatening than the pain of losing them. It's not the absence of love, it's the fear of what love demands. To the avoidant, distance isn't just a habit, it's a survival strategy. When relationships begin to deepen, when emotions run high and the stakes feel real, their instinct is not to move closer, but to create space. And this space isn't meant to hurt the other person. It's meant to help the avoidant regain their internal balance. For them, closeness often feels like being swallowed. It stirs up old unresolved fears, fears of being controlled, misunderstood, or ultimately abandoned when they're seen too clearly. So rather than risk that emotional chaos, they choose what feels safer Distance. This isn't a conscious decision most of the time. It's not like they sit down and think, let me push this person away now. It's an automatic reaction, hardwired from years of emotional programming. Their nervous system interprets emotional proximity as a threat, even if the relationship is healthy. When someone is emotionally available, consistently showing up, expressing care or vulnerability, it creates discomfort because it demands a level of intimacy the avoidant doesn't fully trust. To cope, they may become hyper-independent, invest more in work, hobbies, or distractions, or even start criticizing the other person to justify the withdrawal. The need for space isn't inherently bad. Everyone needs room to breathe in a relationship. But for an avoidant, this need for distance becomes extreme and rigid. It's not about taking time to self-regulate. It's about shutting down emotional access entirely. They often don't know how to stay present and connected when things become emotionally intense. So they leave, or they shut down, or they emotionally disappear, even while physically staying in the relationship. And they believe on some level that this is the only way to stay safe. Closeness feels like they're losing their autonomy. And for someone whose core coping mechanism is control, that's terrifying. There's also a deep-rooted belief many avoidants carry that people will eventually let them down or try to change them. So if someone starts getting close, it's not just that they feel overwhelmed, it's that they assume it's only a matter of time before they'll be criticized, rejected, or exposed. The distance then becomes preemptive. If they pull back now, they won't have to face the potential hurt later. It's a strategy of emotional self-preservation, even if it ends up sabotaging the very connection they secretly long for. This is why arguments with avoidance often don't go anywhere. The moment emotions escalate, they shut down. You might just want to talk things out to resolve an issue, to get closer through honesty, but they interpret this as confrontation or pressure. So instead of working through the discomfort, they retreat further. You may find yourself trying harder, over-explaining, or chasing clarity while they continue to disengage. That cycle becomes exhausting for both sides, but especially for the person trying to connect with someone who sees closeness as something to escape. In many ways, the avoidant is afraid of being seen too deeply, not because they don't want love, but because they doubt they can survive love without losing themselves. They've spent so long protecting their inner world that opening it up feels like handing someone the power to destroy it. That fear of being emotionally naked and vulnerable drives the distance. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring terrifies them. It puts them at risk. And when risk equals danger in their mind, retreating feels like the only sane option. Over time, this behavior often pushes partners away, not because the partner stops caring, but because they become emotionally depleted. And when the partner finally walks away, the avoidant may feel relief, pain, and confusion all at once. Relief that the pressure is gone, pain that the connection is lost, confusion over why they couldn't just let themselves lean in. But in their world, distance is synonymous with safety. It's the only thing that's ever made them feel in control of their emotional experience. Until the avoidant starts to recognize this pattern, until they confront the fear that drives their distancing, they'll continue to choose space over intimacy, control over connection, and safety over vulnerability. Not because they don't want love, but because they never learned how to feel safe in it. Avoidance is often mistaken for indifference. On the surface, the avoidant partner might seem cold, detached, or even heartless. They don't chase, they don't beg, they don't fight to keep you when you start to pull away, and from the outside, it can look like they simply don't care. But that's not the truth, not even close. Avoidance isn't about not feeling, it's about not knowing how to handle what they feel. It's about suppressing, numbing, and protecting themselves from emotions that feel too big, too messy, or too dangerous to process. What looks like emotional distance is actually emotional protection. For many avoidants, feelings are overwhelming, not because they're weak, but because they were never taught how to regulate or express emotions safely. They may have grown up in environments where emotions were ignored, punished, or used against them. So they learned early on that showing emotion whether it's sadness, joy, anger, or love, comes with consequences. They internalize the belief that the safest thing to do is shut down, stay in control, and never let anyone see what's really going on inside. That's why even when they care deeply, they often seem unaffected. This protective mechanism doesn't mean they're immune to heartbreak or immune to love. In fact, avoidants often feel just as much, if not more, than they let on. The difference is, instead of expressing those feelings, they bury them. They push them down so they don't have to deal with the discomfort. Vulnerability is perceived as a weakness, not a strength. So even when they want to reach out, say something, or take a risk emotionally, their protective instincts kick in. Stay silent. Don't react. Don't expose yourself. That internal voice wins, and to the outside world, it looks like they just didn't care enough to try. This can be incredibly painful for the person on the other side of the relationship. You're opening up, showing your heart, trying to connect, and you're met with silence or withdrawal. You're hoping for a reaction, hoping they'll fight for you, but they don't. What you don't see is the storm happening inside them. The conflict between their emotions and their fear. Their desire for connection is often buried under layers of self-protection, mistrust, and fear of loss. And the more intense the emotion, the more likely they are to detach, because that's what feels familiar and safe. Even in moments when they seem completely shut off, they're often just overwhelmed, their system is flooded, and instead of lashing out or breaking down, their response is to retreat into themselves. Silence is how they cope. Distance is how they stabilize. That's how they've survived emotionally for so long. They don't trust that expressing their feelings will help anything. It never did in the past, so why start now? What makes it even harder is that many avoidants aren't fully aware of this pattern. They don't see their behavior as avoidance. They see it as being rational, self-sufficient, or emotionally mature. They might even believe they're doing the right thing by staying calm and distant in the face of conflict. They don't realize that their version of calm feels like emotional abandonment to their partner. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're trying to protect themselves from being hurt again. This is why avoidant people often feel a deep sense of regret after a relationship ends. They don't usually fight for the person in the moment, but weeks or months later, the feelings catch up. The emotions they pushed down start to surface. The loss becomes real. But by then, it's often too late. The person who needed them to show up emotionally has already walked away, and the avoidant is left wondering why they couldn't just open up when it mattered. Avoidance is a shield, not a lack of heart. It's a defense built on past pain, not an indication of present apathy. But unless it's understood and addressed, it becomes a cycle, one where meaningful connections are lost, not because the avoidant didn't feel anything, but because they felt too much and didn't know how to handle it. And that's the tragedy, not that they don't care, but that they care so much it scares them into silence. One of the hardest truths to accept in any relationship, especially with someone avoidant, is that you can't fix what they won't face. No matter how much love, patience, or understanding you bring to the table, it won't change someone who is emotionally unavailable unless they decide to change. You can bend, accommodate, explain, reassure, and even exhaust yourself trying to make them feel safe. But if they're unwilling to confront their own fears, their past, or the way they show up in relationships, you'll always hit the same wall. You'll find yourself doing all the emotional heavy lifting while they stay frozen in place. It's natural to want to help someone you care about, especially when you see their potential. Maybe you see their quiet moments of vulnerability. Maybe you've heard them say things that hint at their deeper feelings. So you hang on, hoping that if you just love them harder or more patiently, they'll finally break through their walls. But that's not how healing works. Healing isn't something you can force on someone. It's something they have to choose for themselves. And until they make that choice, all your efforts will feel one-sided. You'll be pouring into a connection that keeps leaking through the cracks they refuse to seal. People who lean toward avoidance often don't even realize the damage they're causing, not because they're malicious, but because their self-protection blinds them. They're so focused on managing their own discomfort, on keeping themselves from feeling overwhelmed that they don't recognize how much they're hurting the person trying to love them. They may see your emotional needs as demands, your vulnerability as pressure, and your efforts as invasions. And so instead of responding with care, they respond with distance or defensiveness. And in doing so, they shut the door on the very intimacy they say they want. Here's where the real heartbreak often sets in. You can see the cycle, you understand it. You might even educate yourself about attachment styles, trauma, emotional regulation, anything to understand them better. And while that understanding is powerful, it doesn't grant you the ability to heal them. Insight is not a substitute for boundaries. Knowledge is not a replacement for action. You can't be their therapist. You can't be their emotional rescue plan. If they're not ready to confront their own behavior, your insight becomes your burden, and your relationship becomes a place where you shrink yourself just to keep the peace. There comes a moment when you have to recognize that their healing is their responsibility, not because you don't care, but because you care enough to stop enabling the cycle. When someone refuses to face their emotional patterns, refuses to acknowledge the harm those patterns cause, and chooses silence over growth, you have to let them. You have to respect that it's their journey, even if that means walking away from it. Not as a punishment, but as a boundary. Because staying in a relationship where your emotional needs are chronically dismissed doesn't make you loyal, it makes you lost. It's incredibly hard to walk away from someone you believe could change, especially if you've invested a lot of time and energy into the relationship, or if you're someone who naturally wants to help uplift and see the good in people. But there's a quiet power in realizing that you're not responsible for someone else's emotional maturity. You're not the answer to their healing. And clinging to that role doesn't save them. It slowly erodes you. It makes you question your worth. It drains your spirit. And it teaches you to tolerate love that only exists in potential. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you started caring about yourself too. It means you stopped trying to prove your value to someone who was too afraid to receive it. And that's one of the hardest but most freeing realizations you can have. You're not walking away because you gave up on them. You're walking away because they gave up on themselves. And you finally saw that no matter how inspiring or strong your love was, it was never your job to carry someone through a healing process they're still denying. Walking away is often seen as defeat, especially when you've invested your heart in someone. But when you're dealing with an avoidant, walking away isn't weakness, it's your power move. It's the moment you stop abandoning yourself for the sake of being close to someone who won't meet you halfway. You stop chasing clarity from someone who communicates through silence. You stop negotiating your emotional needs just to maintain a connection that keeps you on edge. And in that decision, you reclaim something profound: your agency, your dignity, your peace. When you walk away from an avoidant, you're not just leaving a person. You're leaving a cycle. One where you're constantly second-guessing yourself, wondering what you did wrong, trying to decode mixed signals, and shrinking your needs to avoid pushing them further away. That cycle is emotionally draining because it keeps you locked in a space where you're always trying, always giving, but never receiving the depth or consistency you deserve. And the more you stay, the more you start believing that this is all love is supposed to feel like: uncertain, unstable, and just out of reach. But love shouldn't feel like chasing. Real love shows up, it leans in when things get hard, it communicates, it grows. And walking away is your declaration that you're no longer settling for connection that costs you your emotional well-being. It's not about punishing the avoidant or teaching them a lesson. It's about choosing yourself in a space where you've been consistently chosen second, or not at all. Because the truth is, staying in a relationship where your emotional needs are minimized slowly teaches you to minimize yourself. It trains you to normalize distance and disconnect, to accept crumbs and call it enough. What happens after you walk away can be confusing. The avoidant might not come after you. They might not call or fight or even express regret right away. And that can sting because you wanted that final confirmation that they cared. But here's the hard truth. Their silence doesn't mean you were unlovable. It means they are still trapped in their pattern, still choosing safety over vulnerability, still prioritizing emotional control over connection. And your silence in return? That's not coldness. It's courage. It's the strength to hold your boundary even when it hurts. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop fighting for someone else and start standing fully for yourself. You begin to see that your worth was never supposed to be proven through suffering. That love isn't something you earn by staying loyal to someone's fear. You realize that leaving doesn't make you bitter, it makes you brave. It means you're done trying to unlock someone's heart with a key that was never yours to hold. You accept that some people will only meet you at the level of emotional depth they're comfortable with. And that has nothing to do with how deeply you can love. And maybe one day they'll realize what they lost. Maybe they'll look back and wish they had handled things differently. But that's not your responsibility anymore. Your responsibility is to yourself, to heal, to grow, to find the kind of connection that doesn't require you to walk on emotional eggshells just to keep it. Walking away is the beginning of that healing. It's the space where you finally stop asking why they couldn't love you right and start asking yourself why you stayed so long trying to earn it. You walk away not because you gave up on love, but because you finally understood what love isn't. And in that clarity, you set yourself free. Not bitter, not broken, just done. Done hoping. Done fixing. Done waiting. And from that place of self-respect, something beautiful begins. The return to your own wholeness. So here's the truth. Sometimes love isn't enough to make someone stay. Sometimes the more you try to show up, the more they pull away. And it hurts. It's confusing. It makes you question your worth. But what you need to remember is this. Their inability to love you the way you deserve isn't a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their fear. Their silence isn't clarity. Their distance isn't peace. And their avoidance isn't strength. It's just unhealed pain dressed up as protection. You can't force someone to meet you where they refuse to go within themselves. And that's not your failure, it's their choice. But you do have a choice too. You can keep waiting, shrinking, compromising, or you can rise. You can stop begging for connection and start demanding alignment. You can walk away not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care enough about your peace, your needs, your future to stop pouring into a cup that was never open to receive you. Walking away isn't quitting, it's choosing yourself. It's honoring the love you carry by no longer giving it to someone who runs from it. Because you weren't meant to chase love, you were meant to receive it fully, freely, and fearlessly. And now, you're ready.